va plutôt que de faire des présentations un peu classiques et que chacun parle dans son coin, on va essayer d'avoir une discussion un peu plus interactive, donc avec plusieurs tours de parole. Donc je vous présente d'abord les trois invités qui nous ont rejoints ce matin. Donc Sergiu Miscoiu, qui est professeur en sciences politiques à l'université de Cluj, qui est donc en Roumanie.
Bonjour.
Pierre Vercotteren, qui est professeur en sciences politiques à l'université catholique de Louvain, donc qui représente la Belgique. On a des équipes nationales en quelque sorte. Et puis Grigoriou Panayotis, qui est professeur en institutions internationales et européennes à l'université de Liège, en Grèce évidemment. Et on va, tous les trois sont des spécialistes des questions de gouvernance européenne, gouvernance locale, et des thèmes qui nous réunissent aujourd'hui. Tous les trois sont évidemment des spécialistes d'études européennes, comme vous le savez. Et donc on va réfléchir aujourd'hui. Alors, je ne sais pas dans l'ordre que vous voulez, un tour de table à chaque fois, alors dans un sens ou dans l'autre, à votre choix, en changeant un petit peu les échelles d'analyse et en commençant peut-être par l'échelle locale, en réfléchissant d'abord aux questions de décentralisation et de gouvernance. Donc en Roumanie, en Grèce, en Belgique, comment ces questions se posent plutôt à l'échelle plus locale ?
Vous voulez que je commence ? Bonjour et merci. Merci de m'avoir donné la parole et de m'avoir invité. Merci Michel Catala aussi pour l'honneur qu'il me fait depuis déjà quelques années de m'inviter constamment à Nantes afin d'intervenir. Donc pour entamer un peu la discussion en ce qui concerne la première question, la décentralisation notamment dans l'espace. Oui.
Pardon, est-ce que c'est possible d'intervenir en anglais?
En anglais.
Ah, en anglais.
It's possible for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
I was thinking Jenny was speaking in French, and maybe you could speak in English.
Okay, sorry. I forgot. We decided this yesterday, but I forgot. So I will switch to English now. In order to discuss issues related to decentralization in Eastern Europe, and more particularly in Romania, we have to let's say, set a little bit the context of the discussions concerning decentralization. This context is, in the Romanian case at least, related to the efforts of European integration. And it was as late as in 2006 that we had the first framework legislation on decentralization. The main issue here concerning decentralization was, of course, the financial one. And all the discussions concerning decentralization, deconcertation, and the devolution to the local and regional institutions, virtual regional institutions, because Romania has no regions, were related to this financial issue that was put first. And this could open the discussion very widely, but also very deeply, about the effects of financial decentralization on the cohesion of territorial units such as countries and regions, but also on the long-term policies of the state, the capacity of the state to implement long-term policies by using financial tools. Because of that, Romania, that was a country with a very French Jacobin model, with 40 counties called județ, after the name of the judge who was had the jurisdiction in the respective area, was one of the most centralized countries in Europe, and still is. Despite all efforts, there was no success in implementing regional organizations, regional units, or regional administrative territorial units. What we have in Romania is only some sort of organization of some counties in a regional framework that is only related to development policies, but has no jurisdiction whatsoever over the administration itself. And because of this too centralized model, the only tool that was in the end considered to be efficient was the hyper financial decentralization, which created as an outcome a very strong polarization and differentiation between the counties, and especially between the urban and the rural areas. So to sum up, a very centralized state with no regional layers, with traditional Republican Jacobin French dispatchment of the country into counties, and as a remedy to that, the hyper financial decentralization that was pushed especially by the local and regional lobbies in such a way that the result was an increasing polarization at the level of the entire country. And this is just to introduce a little bit the situation in Romania.
Thank you. It is my turn to thank you very much, Michel, and the whole team for the organization of this winter school and for this invitation. Thank you very much, Michel. As far as Belgium is concerned, the situation is deeply rooted into the Belgian evolution, politically speaking. Belgium was created in 1830 as a unitary state, but with its various components, we can underline three main cleavages since its inception. Linguistic, between the Dutch-speaking and the French-speaking. Philosophical, mainly Catholic, non-Catholic. And economic. These cleavages interacted with one another, but creating strong movements of devolution of powers from the unitary states to local entities. And the turning point, the watershed, was in 1970. There, officially, the constitution was transformed in such a way that we are having the major institution creating what is nowadays a federal state, with strong arguments and negotiations between mainly the French-speaking and the Dutch-speaking. From the Dutch-speaking side, the idea was to create a devolution of power according to identity and culture. From the French-speaking, the idea was to have a devolution of power according to economic cleavage. And of course, there were different evolutions. During the 19th century, Wallonia was one of the wealthiest regions in the world, while in Flanders, they encountered extreme economic poverty. It turned after the Second World War, where there was an economic decline in Wallonia, and an economic rise in Flanders. This impacted negotiations between the Flemish and the Walloons, basically. And so the Flemish wanted a kind of division of the country according to the linguistic approach. The Walloons wanted according to the economic divide. And so there was a kind of Belgian compromise still existing nowadays. In 1970, the constitution was changed in such a way that we created 3 cultural communities and 3 economic regions. Those are not especially matching geographically speaking. You are having 3 cultural communities, the Flemish one, the French-speaking one, and the Dutch-speaking one along the German border. You have 3 economic regions: Flemish region, the Brussels region, and the Walloon region. As you can see, geography is not really matching. But that is key to understanding the way regional policies from a European perspective is approaching Belgium. Because, indeed, regional funds from the European perspective is not only economic, it also deals with culture, with education. And according to the fund invoked, either the regions are competent or the communities are competent. And that needs to be kept in mind when we reflect and we compare all approach from all different countries. What is important to say is that the regions and the communities are the major players in their field vis-à-vis the European Union. So each time, for instance, we're talking about the European Development Fund, mainly economic, that's not the federal state who is the actor. These are the regions in full autonomy compared vis-à-vis the state. So that's completely different compared, for instance, with the French region or with any other country's region. So I'll keep that this so far.
Okay, thank you. Merci beaucoup pour cette occasion, pour cette invitation. Merci beaucoup, Michel. I would like to present the situation in Greece. But I am afraid that when we try to discuss about decentralization in Europe, we speak a different language. It's we don't have the same concept about decentralization in Europe, in Belgium, in Romania, in Greece. Greece is a centralized country. And in the beginning, I will try to give a definition for decentralization. And this definition is proposed by World Bank, and in according with this definition, decentralization is the transfer of authority and responsibilities for public functions from central government to regional governments or quasi-independent government organizations. We have the devolution of powers to subnational authorities, and this devolution is a multitude process determined by a set of different factors, such as territorial scale, citizenship, and socioeconomic characteristics, and especially by institutional arrangements and country characteristics. About the Greek case, the decentralization in Greece deployed in the last 3 decades via 2 local government reforms. The first reform is the Capodistria plan. Capodistria was the first governor of the new Greek independent state, and the second plan was the Kallikratis plan. And Kallikratis was the architect who is responsible for Parthenon, Acropolis. And we have 2 laws for the first plan, Capodistria plan. We have the law 2539 from 1997, and for the second plan, Kallikratis plan, we have the law 3852 from 2010. And in accordance with 2 laws, we have finally the transformation of a huge number of 5,775 municipalities and communities into 325 enlarged municipalities, institutionalized the 13th region as a second tier of local government, and transferred an unparalleled set of rights and powers to municipalities and regions. About Capodistrias reform, this reform had bigger social acceptance than Kallikratis, as economic crisis and rough spatial planning deterred the effective implementation of the second wave of reforms. Non-institutional actors and members of societal and cultural organizations perceived more substantially the reforms than institutional actors, and no members of local organizations did. Further improvements are necessary, of course, for the modernization of Greek local governments in the fields of financial decentralization and administrative capacity. In Greece regions, I will use the EU categorization. Regions NUTS 2 substituted prefectures, the other category, NUTS 3, in the field of second tier of local government units. These changes, apart from the rearrangement of the local government map, improved the operation framework for municipalities and regions and brought into the frontline cooperation of local actor as an intangible asset of regional development. A last remark about the Capodistrias reform. For this reform, non-institutional actors assessed that the institutional arrangements respected the historical background of the communities and municipalities in Greece, and in addition, the members of this group argued that Capodistrias reform was connected more successful with investment projects from local welfare and local policies for local welfare. I think that I tried to present my first thoughts about the situation in Greece, but also this first projects about the decentralization, these laws, Capodistrias and Kallikratis, and we will continue our debate. Thank you.
Et alors, à partir de ces cas nationaux, quelles sont les relations entre ces différentes autorités locales, régionales, que vous avez évoquées en fonction des cas, et les institutions européennes, les autorités européennes, la gouvernance européenne? On fait le tour dans l'autre sens.
Oui.
Ok. Ok, thank you. Donc, je continue. Hein? Je continue. Okay. Firstly, I would like to explain what in Greece, what is local authority, what is a regional authority. When we present the local authority in Greece, we speak about the municipality, and about the municipality there is the Municipal Council, which is composed of members selected by direct universal suffrage for a 4-year term. And there is the Municipal Council is a deliberative assembly headed by the mayor, and it is the decision-making body of the municipality. The Municipal Council is, of course, composed of a number of committees, including the Financial Committee, the Quality of Life Committee, and the Board of Immigrant Integration. About the regional authority, there is, of course, the Regional Council, that is composed of members elected by also by direct universal suffrage for a period of 4 years. There is also a deliberative assembly presented by the head of the region, and this body is the regional authority decision-making institution. The regional council is composed of a number of committees, also including the Financial Committee and the Regional Committee for consultation. The local and the regional authorities in Greece, but my opinion is for all the European countries, are vital for the democratic life of the European Union, and these authorities are the key actors in the conception and the implementation of common European policies. At an institutional level, this framework, these relations between the Greek regions and the European authorities, I think the most important point for this relationship is the Committee of the Regions of the European Union. And this committee is the political assembly that provides regions and cities with a voice at the heart of the European Union. This Committee of the Regions is established in 1994, and it was set up to address two main issues. Firstly, about 3/4 of European Union legislation is implemented at local or regional level, so it makes sense for local and regional representatives to have a say in the development of new European Union laws and to monitor compliance with the principle of subsidiarity, ensuring that decisions are taken as close to the grassroots as possible. The second point is that there were concerns that the public was being left behind as the European Union steamed ahead. Involving the elected level of government closest to citizens was one way of closing the gap, and the Committee of the Regions is consulted whenever new proposals are made in areas that have repercussions at the regional or local level, at least in 10 areas, for example, economic and social cohesion, trans-European infrastructure networks, etc., etc. I think that another, and it's the last point for your question, about your question, I think that it's very important to discuss also, to see also the position of the European regions or the European local authorities in Brussels. and we can discuss about the participation of these local and regional authorities in the lobbying that exists in Brussels, and at the level of the European Commission, of the European Parliament, or also of the Council of the European Union. And my opinion is that at this level, the level of the lobbying, I think we can understand what is the relationship of a regional authority with the European system, but also we can understand the capacity of a region in the internal system of decisional system of the country, of the European country, of the European Union partner. Thank you.
In order to answer the question, I would like first to raise some information about what are we talking as far as this European regional policy. What does it imply? Basically, it's known under the label of the Structural and Investment European Funds. It's related, one, to the European Funds for Regional Development, and second, to the European Social Funds. These are tools provided financially for an important amount of money in order to help various perspectives in different regions. And it's important to notice this because at least they can provide a help to local authorities in 3 categories of regions from the European regions. First, the most developed regions. For instance, in Belgium, Flanders is among them, North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. In Wallonia, just the Walloon-Brabant province is among these. Second, regions in transition. And the third, less developed regions. And according to the category your region belongs to, you will be eligible or non-eligible to such or such funds. Let's be clear about what it does imply financially speaking. In the periods on 2007-2013, the global European budget was about 970 billion euros. That was the global budget. The regional funds were about 450 billion euros. But what does it imply? It implies, of course, the amount of money provided from the European budget, provided there is an added budget provided by the local authorities themselves. And a third possibility is to get some private participation to this budget. And this is conditioned. If you want to be eligible, first you need to meet the criteria which region is. If it's one of the most developed regions, you won't be eligible. If you are in the category of transition, you will be eligible, but your local authority needs to add public money, and you need to find private sponsors to intervene in it. That's something to be kept into account. Now, from the Belgian perspectives, we have different realities according to one region and the other. As I mentioned, Flanders is one of the most developed regions, so not eligible to the same budget as Wallonia. And in Wallonia, Walloon-Brabant is not eligible because one of the most developed one. That's the first point. Second point, we need to see exactly in which field those money can be spent. And here, according to repartition of powers in Belgium, either we do have shared competencies or exclusive competencies. For instance, in transportation, this is a shared competence between the federal states and the regions. Why? As far as railway is concerned, that is federal competence. But road development, these are regions' competencies. So when there is a file related to transportation, it's a shared competence. So what is the need in order to find an agreement between the various regions there is that the federal ministers convenes a coordination meetings with the regions in order to have a common position vis-à-vis the European institutions. If it's an exclusive competence by the regions, then the regions themselves need to coordinate with one another in order to approach the European Union Commissions. So that's an aspect considering the fact that this is the budget provided by the European Union. How are we going to deal with this? But there is another point, of course, because that's when the budget is already decided by the European Union. Now, another perspective is to see how can we influence the conception of the European policy before it's being decided. And there, of course, is the need for also cooperations between the federal region, the federal level government and the region. And of course, we need to take into account the field in itself. If it's in economy, these are the regions. If it's cultural, these are the communities. It's important because, for instance, the European Social Cohesion Funds relates to the training of people who are unemployed and they need to be better qualified. And everything related to education is the matter of the communities. So there the communities are entering into. So I stuck to that so far, but we can go further into details about the way regions and communities can deal with lobbying European institutions.
Thank you. In contrast with the Belgian case, the Romanian case is at the same time more easily readable and a little bit sad in the following way. So, as I said in the introduction, there is no such thing as a regional settlement in Romania. We have the three layers: the central layer, the county layer, and the local layer. And the municipalities can differ in terms of their status, but they are all at the local level. And because of European integration, it was mandatory to introduce some sort of regional settlement. And this was the tricky part. The government never wanted to provide tools for these regions to be functional and especially to cast decisions. And this was because of the lobby of the counties in order to keep the power there. And because of this lack of capacity of the government to impose regionalization, the second layer, intermediary layer, that is the actor, the most active actor in the case of Greece, but especially in the case of Belgium, is quasi-absent in the Romanian case. The compromise solution that was found, but that doesn't work, is to organize countries in regions. We have 8 regions, but they are not regions in the proper terms of a constitutional and legislative way, but they are regions for development, as they are called. They do not have administrative bodies of their own, and they are actually run by NGOs. Ultimately, these are NGOs because they are associations of local authorities invested with the power of the state. And so, in order to chase the European funds, the regions were quite weak. They had no authority, so local actors and especially the central government took most of these decisions. And here there is a continuous conflict between the municipalities, especially the most active municipalities, with lobbies in Brussels, with lots of capacity to gain funds and especially to spend them. And on the other side, the central government that operates the European Development Funds via management units that are subordinated to the ministries. And of course, this creates a huge bureaucratic deadlock, because these units close to the ministers tend to keep the decision making there, to spend according to their the governmental plans rather than according to the interests of the local authorities. And in this way, there is an endless, let's say, conflict between municipalities and the central level. A remedy to that, as I sketched in the introduction, was this law that started in 2006 and was amended and developed throughout the time to leave a wider share of the incomes originating from various taxes to the local and county authorities. And this, of course, created a huge polarization between the centers of wealthy counties and these centers, especially in the central and northwestern Romania, are able both to provide highly qualitative public services as compared to the rest of the country, and to even create surpluses because of the taxes that they are able to get and to invest. And the rest of the country, including counties in the nearby regions surrounding these wealthy cities, because of the lack of regional cohesion and the lack of a proper regional unit, there is no such thing as a regional policy. So these cities tend to grab everything, to play almost independently. The only obstacle is still the central government as a player at the European level, and in this way they tend to become stronger, and polarization is much more important than it was 10 years or 20 years ago. So in a nutshell, there is a failure of the purpose itself of the cohesion funds that are sent to a country such as Romania, because the perverse mechanism of financial decentralization makes it that there is an increasing polarization, and there is no such thing as a proper regional development.
Alors, on va poursuivre. Et comment tout ça se traduit au niveau des politiques structurelles?
Okay, so these policies of Brussels, if they cannot solve regional disbalance in Romania, they are to some extent efficient, or they were to some extent efficient in empowering actors who are already generally active at the European level. And once again, structural policies, and Romania being one of the countries that falls entirely into the last categories of structural funding, so it qualifies for all the levels of funding, being one of the less developed countries in the European Union. Made efforts, especially at the central level, to implement policies in order to spend structural funds. The lack of the regional authorities and the proper competencies for the regions generally consisted in a huge obstacle to the deployment of European funding. Because, for instance, in the first financial term between 2007 and 2013, Romania succeeded to spend only less than 25% of the total structural funds, even if it was new member of the European Union and with all the regions qualifying for European funding, the second term between 2014 and 2020 is a little bit better, and this is due also partially, at least, to the cynicism of authorities. For the last 3 years, but this year it's even more salient than in the past, we have a provision in the law of the budget in Romania that funding of institutions and on different sectors such as research, education or health will be completed by shares of the European structural funds. So, for instance, the budget of education is less than 2.6%. The budget for research is 0.17%. But the government was happy with this budget, saying that anyway you will get European money because of the structural funds, which is, of course, a bet that is not really calculable in the budget. You do not really know if you will get that money or you will not get it. So because of the incapacity to spend the European structural funds that are already there, now there is this not only incentive but to a high extent pressure of the government for all the actors, all the institutional actors in all the major fields, to find money from Europe in order to complete their budgets and not complain that they have low budgets at the national level. And it's maybe too early to call. It could work, but once again, this works in those areas and in those fields where you have already a strong institutional capacity, where you have a better governance of those areas or bodies, and it will be even worse in those regions that have no access whatsoever to these kind of resources.
About this, I would like to answer to two levels of questions. First, how is it implemented inside? And the second, how regions or communities can influence European authorities in the conception and maybe the devolution of money. Inside first. Let's take the case of exclusive power for regions on the one side and communities on the other side. There begins inside a strong political negotiation between various partners. As you know, in Belgium, usually we do have coalition governments, not only on the federal level, but also on the community and the regional levels. And of course, according to the regions the minister or one of the parties belongs to, he would like to draw more money from the European funds for its own regions. And so it's subject to extremely strong negotiations inside the coalition to see which funds for which province or which funds for which municipality, because it goes as down as that. And so this is subject to extremely strong and hard, tough negotiations in itself, but also, as I said before, in the construction, the financial constructions. Remember, each project, for instance, needs to be European financed, public financed, and private financed as well. So for each project to be eligible, let's say for a local community, in order to have a new infrastructure development in a municipality, the municipality must come with its own financial means, with private partners, in order to be eligible to get some European funds, but decide it on the regional level. So you see how difficult sometimes it can be to build up the kind of financial architecture in order to get the funds for a precise project. And of course, something which can be eligible in such period can no more be eligible in the period afterward, because the project is achieved, you would like to get another one, but maybe, the municipality next door is more eligible than you are. So that's one of the aspects. But now, on the other side, meaning how the regions or the communities can influence the European level. Here it's important to see that geographically speaking we have a kind of advantage. The institutional structure provides that the political weight of regions and community is such that they are major partners in the decision for the Belgian positions inside the European Union in order to negotiate all these funds. What have they done? Regions and community first opened representation offices in Brussels, because they know, of course, that according to the European institutional system, the exclusive legislative initiative is in the European Commission. So the European Commission is the first target. With local representation office, they get access to possible informations which might be important to future negotiations. Second, they are lobbying high civil servant in the European Commission. Then there is a second level. When the project is sent from the European Commission, it goes to the European Council, the Council of Ministers. And there also regions are intervening in Belgium. Why? Well, either it's a shared competence and there are some coordination meetings for the Belgian position, so they are influencing this, or it's exclusive competence. And then one of the three regions, for instance, Minister, after coordination with its two colleagues, is going to the Council of Ministers advocating the case for the Belgian regions. And then, of course, after such a decision is taken, it goes to the European Parliament. And there also there is a possibility for the regions to influence, not only for the Council of Regions, no, but also at the European Parliament itself. Why? As I said before, government of regions and communities are coalition governments with political parties represented. But those parties are also having European member of parliaments from their own party in Strasbourg and Brussels. So there they can also try to influence the process. So in these they are, I think, quite well equipped to influence the process at various stages.
Thank you. It's a very important question. Why? Because I think that this question is important for the future of the European integration or for the European fragmentation. The problem is that if we try to answer to this question, and if we try to find the relationship between the European regional authorities and the structural EU structural policies, the answer depends on the degree of decentralization of each country. About the structural policies at the European level, I think that the interlocuteur valable is not the region, unfortunately. Very often the interlocuteur valable is the state, and the state is the actor who regulates the structural future for its region. If we would like to offer a positive position to regional authority, I think that we have to transform the European Union cohesion policy, and we have to offer an effective position to regional authority. About the European cohesion policy, I think that this policy looks at identifying and exchanging successful good practices of communication strategies and initiatives at regional level in relation to the information and dissemination of the use and benefits of the European Union cohesion funds for transposition across the diverse European regional context. The relationship between regional authorities and the EU structural policies is built on two main objectives. The first objective is to raise awareness about the importance of programs, projects and services funded by the cohesion policy funds in terms of benefits on citizens' life. At the heart of this proposal is a bottom-up approach leading regions, citizens and stakeholders become the main protagonists and thereby cohesion policy could benefit from this virtuous cycle. The second objective is to encourage the participation of citizens and stakeholders, of course, on cohesion policy, to turn them in active players in the regional and national dialogue on cohesion policy. That involvement will strengthen the connections between regions and citizens for a more constructive collaboration in the future implementation of the cohesion program. The structural policies, but especially the cohesion policy, is one of the central policy areas of the European Union. The European Union's structural and investment funds, because now after the last European Commission, we have to discuss also about the investment projects and the investment funds. These funds, these structural and investment funds aim to reinforce economic, social and territorial solidarity. And the cohesion policy is the most important expression for the solidarity in the European Union. And around a third of the European Union's public funds are being used for this cohesion policy. For the last programming period between 2014-2020, approximately 454 billion euros is available for these structural and investment funds. This means that European Union's cohesion policy is not merely the European Union's most important investment policy. It is also the expression of solidarity between the European Union and its member states, but also between the European, all the European partners in the, of course, in the framework of the European integration process. And some last thoughts about the cohesion and the importance of the cohesion and structural policy. This policy is a part of the general area of economic policy in the European Union, and its main task is to enable structurally weak regions to minimize their disadvantage and to help them benefit from developments in the wider economy. And I think for us, because we constitute a network, an academic network, this cohesion policy is very important, and for this reason we decided this year, in July, we decided to study, to work on this subject about the European European governance and European Union cohesion policy, and we will organize a summer school in a small Greek island in the region of North Aegean Sea. The name of this island is Inouses. It's an island between Chios Island and Turkish coast, and I think that it will be a challenge for our studies on this subject, and you are invited to participate in this in this activity. Thank you.
If I may just clarify things for this. When we are talking about European structural funds, as I said, we have regional development funds, the big thing. We have European social funds. And the last thing my fellow colleagues and friends referred to was the cohesion funds. Cohesion funds is something extremely specific because it's allocated to regions and states whose GDP is below 90% of the European average GDP. And in this respect, Greece is eligible, but not Belgium. So that means that in all reflections about the possibility to have local authorities applying to some funds, there can be a big difference between Belgium, for instance, and Romania, and Greece on the other side. So just for the sake of clarification in this. And I'm not sure that France, I think France is not eligible to the European cohesion funds. So we need to keep that in mind.
Bon, effectivement, je pense que la France n'est
Non.
pas éligible. Eh bien, écoutez, la parole, avant d'aller poursuivre vos travaux en Grèce, la parole est à vous.
Est-ce que celui-là marche?
Oui, oui, oui. C'est bien.
So thank you so much for your presentations.
Could you present yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. My name is Claudia Rouge. I'm a PhD student at the Nova University of Lisbon, and I'm working on migrant integration at the local level, so I thought this was very interesting to me. And it was very interesting to hear the comparative perspectives between the three countries. And it seems to me that the European Union is actually helping territorial cohesion in Belgium, creating connections between the different levels of government. In Romania, it's having the opposite effect, actually. It's creating disintegration between the regions and the local governments and the central state. And Greece is somewhere in between. This is the interpretation that I got from your presentations. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the role of European networks, for instance, the Eurocities networks or the intercultural cities networks, in terms of the ability of local authorities lobbying. So I'm actually going a level below. I'm thinking about cities rather than regions. And specifically for Dr. Pierre Carteren, I'm sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing your name correctly.
You made it absolutely perfectly.
Okay.
All right.
If you could speak a little about the specificity, the particularity of the Brussels capital region, given that it is the only place where you have the two communities present, and that sometimes I know that they butt heads a lot, right? So how does Brussels itself, as an independent federal entity, is able to deal with the fact with its uniqueness? So thank you very much.
Two part of questions. First, about for instance, European Cities Network. Indeed, all the cities are playing with this as well as an added tool to the one they can already enjoy in the Belgian situations, which means, for instance, that let's say the Charleroi city, or Liège in Walloon region, or Antwerp in Flanders. Of course, they are members of those networks, and they are playing inside the network as well as with the regional government for economic affairs, or their community for education. So they are playing both. It's an added string to the capacity of influencing the process. Now, as far as the Brussels region is concerned, you are right. Brussels is a peculiar region on the regional level because Brussels does not entirely enjoy the same powers as the other two regions, the Walloon one and the Flemish one. It's something a bit below. On the community affair, indeed, the Flemish community goes from Flanders to the Flemish-speaking people, the Dutch-speaking people of Brussels. The French-speaking community goes from the Walloon region and the French-speaking citizens of Brussels. And of course, they need to deal with that as far as education or culture is concerned. So indeed, in these fields, they need to negotiate with their counterparts from the Flemish community and the French-speaking community in order to get some promotion. But at the same time, as geographically they are located strategically, they can play both strings. Would you like to add something about the cities and other networks?
Yeah. Well, at least in the Romanian case, this was also an added element to this disconnection between the active, dynamic urban areas being able to engage into networks and being able to lobby efficiently at the European level, and the other parts of Romania where such things are really very difficult to imagine even. Although there are several other networks for smaller cities, towns, and even federations of villages, and some villages are active in that. It's once again exceptional and related to those who are in a small minority. Most of all, at most, these urban areas are about very efficient urban areas are covering at most 10 to 15% of the total population of Romania, and they do very well via this lobbying in different networks, gaining projects directly with the European money extra from the regular European funds, but also being able to to negotiate, for instance, the organization of different events, festivals, or other such things in those major cities. But once again, it concerns only a small elite of the total administrative territorial units in Romania.
Thank you. Okay, for me it's very different to explain the importance of the role of the cities, of a network of cities or of a network of regions. It's very important. Why? Because these networks participate in the lobbying context. They can form some actors, but these actors have a consultative role. It's very important to explain also that if we discuss about the role of the active participation of a region, is another thing. The participation of the regional authorities means that the regions participate in the committee of the regions, and there they have another role, an institutional role, and the regions can participate in the decision-making system of the European Union. The lobbies can influence the different institutions of the European Union, but their role is consultative. And the important is to discuss about the capacity of the regional system, of the regional authorities to be present in the decision-making system. For me, it's very important it's very important if the European Union can use the term region, regional authority, etc., for all the European partners, and this term has the same meaning for the decision-making system. My friend Pierre used the term community, and Pierre refers to a federal state. My friend Sergio presented a system quasi centralized in Romania. I tried to present the region, the Greek region, but in the framework of a centralized system. And if the system, the Romanian system, is new for the European the European situation, etc. For Greece, it's different. We try to change the situation since 1981, after the accession of Greece to the European communities. And the problem is that we are always a centralized country, and the region is a part of this categorization of the European Union. It's not an administrative entity. It's not a political entity. It's an entity that participate in this cohesion European Union cohesion funds. Thank you.
If I can summarize, as far as regions are concerned, the European Union is a bubble tower.
Hello, my name is Christian. My initial background is in political science, and my alma mater is Professor Sergius Babeș at SPAC as well. So I would like to ask, considering your discussion about the differences and the issues that the regions create in nations and somehow differences among the different cases and states, considering the fact that the players in the European games are only the states and none other players, going to this or switching to this regional representation and empowering regional access to funding and regional, decomposition somehow of central authority of states, does it create crisis of action or incapacity to action of several states, like the same example as Romania? If you increase the capacity of regions to manipulate their own agenda and to access European funds, the states do not know how to act to that. And in this regard, my second question, maybe not that much clear as this one, is, does this causes the European identity crisis that we see today? Because that is one of the examples. It's like either European Union goes all in into the deconstruction of state power and goes to the identity of we are all Europeans and so on, we have the same parliament and so on. So could it be the regional empowerment of regional stakeholders be one of the crucial parts of this of creation of this crisis? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. One of the possible answers to the first part of your intervention, it can create problems of coordinations in Belgium indeed. For instance, it's not related to the European funds, but let's take environment and the participation of the Belgian states to the COP conferences, COP. Well, as this is an exclusive competence of the regions, one regional minister is representing all the regions and then the Belgian states. But of course you need to coordinate. And for the last conference it was extremely difficult to coordinate because there are strong differences in the approach towards environment between Wallonia, Brussels and Flanders. So it took time. At the very last moment they were able to have a common position, but a weak one, a low level one for the COP. So indeed, yes, there are cases where an efficient coordination can weaken the position. That's one aspect. But on the other hand, once the decision is taken, once funds are available, each region is directly responsible vis-à-vis the European Union for the use of these funds, or each communities, which means that indeed the European Union knows precisely to whom they need to address to check, to audit the use of these funds. And of course, these funds are subject to extremely deep scrutinies about the way it is spent. How far, how well, how legal, etc. But they know, of course, it's different with my Romanian and my Greek friends, when of course they need to go via the states and then of course to local authorities. So that's a different aspect. The second part of your question was about related to the European identity crisis. I do not think that in Belgium we can talk about a kind of European identity crisis. Some indifference. Basically, there's a kind of global Europhile consensus in Belgium about the European construction. It's more indifference sometimes, or lack of awareness about what the European Union is providing to every day of the citizens. But on the other hand, considering the importance of European structural funds in various parts, regional development, for instance, etc., local authorities indeed are aware of the impact European funds can have in some investments. And so indeed, when there is a kind of investment in a city or in a province, etc., then the label of European help has been provided. But for the day-to-day life of every citizen, it's not very telling for them. What is more telling is to have a European passport, or to make use of the euro, or in the Schengen area, being able to go from one country to the other without having to show your passport. That's something much more credible for them than the idea of European structural funds, because of European structural funds. It's something too far away from them. That's how we do feel.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if we accept that in the European Union there is an identity crisis, I don't think that the region could be the actor which will contribute to the resolution of this crisis. Why? Because I agree with Pierre. We have to find the coordinator of this system, which will offer the solution. And I think that this role could only the state can play the role of the coordinator for the regional system. And the state, the European, the states in the European Union, I think that they refused to coordinate the possibilities for looking for solutions. The European states refused the solutions. The possibility for this coordination belongs to the European Union system. And the European Union system, institutional system of course, is not able to play this role. Why? Because we don't have a character, supranational character in this system. We have, at the same time, we have two characters. We have the character, the supranational character, but also we have the intergovernmental character. And for these reasons, the presence, the participation of the states are always very active, and I think that the European states are not able to participate in this debate about the identity crisis in the European Union. And I think that the regions as institutional entities cannot participate actively in this perspective.
I believe that actually regions play at the European level a paradoxical role. To some extent, they are actors of this dismantlement of national identities, as in most cases they negotiate directly with Brussels, they consolidate regional or even sub-regional identities, and so the nation-state project is no longer there to answer to some questions. But in the case of Romania more particularly, I think that they could play the other way around, a very positive or a rather positive role, in that if we are very honest, the nation-state project as seen as the projection of the nation, the civic Romanian civic nation in terms of collective socio-economic project is doing very bad. Is doing very bad, as we have after 2007 3.5 million Romanians who left Romania to work abroad in the European Union. So after Syria, this is the second ranking country in the world with people leaving actually the country of origin, and in Syria there have been some incidents, so I've heard. So we don't have everything that happened after the 1990 was a dismantlement of the social and economic cohesion in a very neoliberal perspective, and the most active and dynamic areas such as Cluj, Timișoara, or other areas in the country were very comfortable with that, as they were able to play on the individual, on individualism and on quasi-individual or micro-communitarian projects in order to win, whereas the other huge majority, actually, if we think in quantitative terms of the Romanian framework, were not able to play it, and so they were left behind. And so regions could be the answer for giving another coherence or a new kind of coherence to this national project that is cut not by regionalism into pieces, but by rather by micro-individualism, micro-communitarianism, and projects that are simply not concerning the others, but concerning only yourself. So I seriously believe that this could be a remedy on a medium term, but actually the political class is very far from being able to implement such a solution.
If I just may add something, because indeed what my friend Sergio just mentioned is extremely important as far as the issue of identity is concerned. And you were referring to the Romanian leaving Romania. I was in Washington, D.C. last weekend, and because I met rectors from Catholic universities. And what strikes me in the United States, they're not talking about leaving, they're talking about moving inside the United States. And indeed, in the European Union, the fact is that someone is leaving Belgium to work in Greece, leaving Greece to work in Germany, etc. They say leaving, they're not saying moving. So it is telling about a kind of mentality still needing to change. It remains within the European Union. That is a fact. It was as if leaving one EU member country was impoverishing the whole European Union. It's not. It's just, but
yes,
we keep in mind, we are member states, we are in the deepest integrated system in the world, but still deeply national state rooted.
Yes, I agree. But officially, the more important principle in the European Union is the principle of the free movement. And if we would like to open another discussion, of course, about this principle and about the future of the European Union, is if the security, the European security, could be the principal axe of this free movement. It's very important, but at the same time we can understand what is the context of this principle for the European member states. It's very important.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ivan. I'm from Serbia, from the University of Belgrade Faculty of Political Sciences. And thank you for your lectures. I was wondering, upon the Christian's question, the first one, Professor Verkuterenu was talking about regional funds, social cohesion, and development funds, and maybe this is a good question for both professors from Romania and Greece. I was wondering, weren't the states the one that had the incentive to finish the decomposition of their powers or relegating their powers to regions and to other stakeholders just because of the development funds and the regional funds so that they could benefit more from the European integration process? And just to add something for what you said about this word game between moving and leaving the state, maybe we have a good example in Serbia because of the negotiations with Kosovo. For example, when you're listening to the public medias in Serbia, they don't use word Kosovo, for example, but they use it with negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina, so that they don't create that sentiment that we are talking about an independent country in our system. So thanks once again.
C'était pour moi, c'était pour vous deux.
Fallait pas dire.
Ah non, non, ça va, ça va.
No, that was to you, not to me. Okay. For the first part of the intervention.
Yeah, for the first part of the intervention, and here you have Greece and Romania who do not recognize Kosovo, officially. So we are not very. Yeah, actually we have huge problems because we would like to work with the University of Pristina, but we cannot sign agreements because we don't recognize Kosovo, so that's a problem.
University of Belgrade.
Yeah, we do have some. Okay, so yeah, this, the regional the regional level and the incapacity of the states to work in a, let's say, in a logical, long-term logic, planning how much you leave as power to the regional level, how much you leave to the local and county level, and what would be in, let's say, 20 years the results of this is something difficult, not only in Central Eastern Europe, but also in Western Europe, because there is really an incapacity of the state to promote very long-term strategies, as they do not anticipate what will happen if these entities will get too much autonomy. And once again, Romania failed, and I think that lots of Serbia, for instance, could very easily learn from this failure, because they tried indeed to get the European money, but at the same time not to create proper regions. No, not to leave control to the regions, but to get European money, and so they created these agencies for regional development, which were without any real power and proved to be very inefficient. And these kind of solutions could not work. So in between, the best case scenario is try to stick to a strategic long-term plan in which you can try to anticipate via various 3 or 4 scenarios what would be the relations in 20 years between these levels of administration in the country as a result of their empowerment, increasing empowerment via the European funding, which is very difficult. I am very sure about this.
Okay, thank you. About your second part of your question, I will underline that Greece does not recognize the Kosovo. It's very important to explain this this term living or moving, etc. Okay. About the cohesion EU cohesion policy, I think that we have to explain that every state in the European Union has a different relation with the cohesion, the European cohesion. For example, France, Belgium are founding member states. Greece was the 10th member state. Romania participated in the great enlargement, the last phase of this enlargement. And for this reason, everyone has another concept about the EU cohesion. We said that actually cohesion is a form of possibility to express the solidarity in the European Union. But the origins of each member state can influence this actual concept about solidarity, cohesion. And maybe there are some partners which consider that cohesion is a form, is a possibility of financial solidarity, or there are some other partners which will explain that cohesion will be an institutional solidarity, or a possibility of the expression of solidarity at the level of security, at the level of defense. There are different concepts, and the official interpretation of this cohesion is unfortunately at the financial level, unfortunately, and we stay there. Okay.
Last question.
Une autre question?
Ah.
Michel se lance.
Oh, pardon.
Excuse-moi, c'est Sergio.
Oui.
Est-ce que tu pourrais nous parler des réseaux de villes qui se constituent en Europe centrale et orientale et qui s'opposent finalement aux politiques de l'Union européenne et à ces mises en place? Je crois qu'il y a des réseaux qui sont constitués des villes d'Europe centrale qui travaillent sur ces questions, en tous les cas qui ont une position très en opposition avec l'Europe et avec les politiques mises en place en Europe, et comment ces réseaux concilient ces positions avec la nécessité de trouver des fonds européens et de l'argent européen, s'il n'y a pas contradiction entre...
Bah, en fait, il y a un réseau des capitales de l'Europe centrale. I switch to English. So there is a network of the Central and Eastern European capitals against populism and pro-Europe. That was founded by Prague, Budapest, Warsaw. It's the other way around. Fighting against there, especially in Poland and in Hungary, capital led by leaders of the opposition, civic liberal or socialist opposition, and trying to make a point that actually these Central and European countries are not at all so conservative and led by populist leaders as they seem. But they need to stick around in order just to be able to have an access to the European funds and to show that they are a part of the European networks of the European values. So actually it's the other way around. I'm not knowledgeable about the federation of the mayors against the European Union, especially because the countries in the area, some of the countries in the area are themselves less inclined, at least nowadays, to be favorable to the European Union, so it's a little bit the other way around.
So I had a question regarding what you just said. Are they organized?
Could you please present yourself?
Yes, sorry. Yes, Amandine. I work at Eurocities in Brussels. Just regarding that you just said, are the cities in the eastern part of Europe organized between themselves in order to, as a counterpower to the national state, or is it just informal discussion that they have, or could they be really organized officially and be against the national position?
So I'm knowledgeable about three such networks. One of them is among Polish cities and Czech and Slovak cities, and it was created especially for let's say regional transportation reasons, but very soon it tried to challenge a little bit state policies. Back then in all the three countries there were governments who were not favorable to the European Union, so to say, back then. So, then you have sub-national networks like the Western Romanian Federation of Cities that was created in order to protest against the policies of the government, the centralist policies of the government, and the very pro-European network of cities. And the last one, it's the most spectacular maybe, is the one that resulted after the election of the new mayor of Budapest. The former mayor of Budapest was a member of Orbán's governmental party Fidesz, and the new member of the new mayor of Budapest is center left-wing green politician, and they together with Warsaw, Bratislava and Prague, they created this network, and now they will formalize it. It was a first very flamboyant meeting and like a statement of war against their governments, more or less, trying to show once again that the people from these cities are European, and they are precisely turn against the policies of their own governments. And now it's on the way of being formalized. Of course, it is not backed by the governments, and it will have it will be a delicate political situation when these cities will try to act together at the European level in relation or against sometimes their own government or their own governmental policies. It was created in November 2019, so it's quite recent.
On a le temps pour une autre question. Sinon, il est 27, donc on est pile.
Discipliné.
Voilà.
C'est grâce à toi.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous.
Merci beaucoup.